1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
All right, there we go. That, everybody into the pool.
Into the bowl.
Into the lake. It is Detroit, City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
Charles wrote a trilogy of books all about the 1935 year, and right now, getting deep into the Gar Wood story.
Absolutely, yeah. We're about ankle deep, I would say.
Yeah. Just wading our way in. I'm loving all of these stories.
Yeah,
man.
when we get to about waist deep, the stories are going to be so. Like I said, this is my favorite story of the entire. There's 33 championships, and this is my favorite of them all. So, like I say, we're really setting the foundation. We're taking our time setting the foundation. We're about ankle deep. Like I say, when we get to waist deep, and there's just wait. It's just so I can't wait to get to the point. But we gotta take our time. We gotta lay the foundation and get to the point. And it really, like I say, it gets to the point where you're just like, man,
you don't want to miss a minute of it.
You can't, not of the show, not of the story or anything. And we don't want to leave any. Like I say, we don't want to leave anything else. That's why we're kind of taking it systematically year by year and kind of building up to the 30s because. By the time we get to the 1930s, mid 30s, 34, 35, and that, Gar Wood is going to be such a, and this is what I guess this is what I want. One of the things that was one of the biggest discoveries for me in the entire story.
Yeah.
Was that I had never even heard of Gar Wood. Okay, I'm from Kalamazoo. I'm not, I never heard. Like every once in a while, people
you didn't party at the Krishna Mansion.
I didn't party at the Gar Wood, the Krishna Mansion, the Hell's Angels Mansion, what they can, with the former Gar Wood Mansion. And that.
Yeah.
I'd never even heard of Gar Wood, and I didn't. He wasn't in my original thesis. He wasn't.
Okay.
He barely he was really in my first book only because of some of the quotes that I saw, but I didn't know really anything. I knew nothing about him.
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying. Like when it was just such like when you start diving into the story, especially through that Speedboat Kings, you realize in his time he was a star amongst stars. He was a superstar amongst stars, and that's like in the screenplay of the movie. I wrote this scene for the first Champions Day. Because Gar Wood was there. I've got photos of him at the dinner.
Yeah.
And like when he walks in, you just try to imagine like he is just the biggest star. Like that are like you got. And that's what I want to show in the movie where all of these players like Joe Louis and all like Mickey Cochran and all these big name stars we were talking about who are people might be somewhat familiar, more familiar with, of course, after listening to our show.
Yeah.
But when you see the movie, there's gonna be all these people that are like the biggest people right? And then Gar Wood's gonna walk in and they're gonna be like in awe of him.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. And that's kind of how I wrote it. They're like, oh my God, Gar Wood's here. Because that's how he was. And that's the thing is that in his day, it would be very difficult to find anyone that was bigger than Gar Wood or as big. Like in his day, he was in that Babe Ruth category.
Wow.
He was a huge star. And we'll see why when we start to really lay it out. Because really, right now we're into 1921, and Gar Wood at this point now is finally recognized. I mean, he is the greatest speedboat racer in the world.
So
there's no doubt now.
You cannot miss a minute of this.
Now, yeah.
So what you have to do is
like and subscribe.
Like it, subscribe it, stop
Share
right
it,
now, pause right now, and then tell a couple friends. Do us a favor, tell a couple of friends. We'd appreciate it. That would help immensely. But like, subscribe. Comments are always welcome. There were two.
We love comments, man. Like
there were a couple new comments
this
week.
We love
on
them.
Some YouTube. Did you see the YouTube comments?
No, I did
this
not.
Week?
No.
There's some new comments this week. Crap! I closed my email because it dings every time we start. While I'm playing the intro, it says you're live on YouTube, and it dings in the middle of the intro, and I'm dang it! So I turned it off. But there were a couple new comments. I just want to give a shout out to the person who was making those comments. RRBEE. RRB.
Is that some code or is that their name on the thing?
RRB.
Well, welcome, RB.
RB.
We appreciate you commenting in.
Hey, RB. Thank you. He's deep into the Red Wings stuff. He's commenting very deliberately on
appreciate you following, man. Appreciate the comment. Every little thing else, we really appreciate it all.
Yep.
Trying to get the show off the ground. We're talking about an era that is before all the stuff, but there's all these modern stories. Everybody's, there's the modern stories, which are, everybody's doing their videos, but we're doing something that's like a time that none of us, that very few people lived in, or hardly anybody remembers anymore. So it's tougher to find people that, we're trying to attach a modern world to to a time gone by, but the significance, we're going to show.
I'm glad people are finding it and enjoying it and commenting.
Absolutely. But we're going to see today one
more
component of the significance. Go ahead. Yeah.
One more shout.
Well, I'm getting cut off my
Chris.
show. Oh yeah, Chris. Yeah, we always got to say what's up to Chris.
Chris just chimed in.
Yeah, Chris.
We
always got
thumbs up. We always
got to say what's up to Chris because he's a big. He's been a huge. He's been a.
He made a cool
long time City of Champions guy. We're gonna show the
talk
crest.
all about that.
We're gonna show the coat of arms
too.
probably the next episode because we don't have it loaded up right now.
But Chris, thanks for being here, and people that watch because the video it streams live while we do it live.
He's done a ton of work
YouTube and Facebook.
He's done a ton of work for the show, and one of these days we'll get him on the show live to talk. He's been a long time City of Champions supporter. He's the one that did the entire the City of the Champions Day Wikipedia page. I gave him the info. He set up the page, and right now, like if you go to if you're listening to the show, if you go to Champions Day, if you just look up Champions Day on Wikipedia, Chris is the one that suggested it to me.
Oh, right on.
And then, like I say, I gave him the information to start the little plant the seed, and then since then, like I learned from the page. You go to Champions Day every couple of months, and it's grown. It's a whole story unto itself. Like I learned from it because every time somebody dumps new information online that has in it, it's like old newspaper articles that have gone digital, it attaches it to Champions Day. So you're reading about like Iowa newspaper mentioning Champions Day or all these different things connected into it. And then there's information that comes to light that you're reading about it going, oh, I never knew that. It's like it's our own page, And Christopher's one that started. So he's definitely a friend of the show, and we appreciate his comments.
So in the last episode, Gar just won his first Harmsworth 1920. That was in 1920.
Yep.
So that for 1921 brings the Harmsworth to Detroit.
Brings it to Detroit. So now the Harmsworth in Detroit, the Gold Cup is in Detroit.
Yeah, baby.
Detroit is becoming the speedboat capital of the world.
Speedboat Kings.
Yes. And so that now we know the name of the book, just Speedboat Kings. This is it. So Gar Wood. So Gar Wood now. Gar Wood's at the point now where
he got lucky though because he had that Miss America 1.
Yeah, on the calm waters.
But by the sound of it, the Miss Detroit 5 would have handily won. But
this is Gar Wood we're talking about. Hell yeah, the Miss Detroit 5 would have won. The final race, the second heat of the Harmsworth Cup was a race only between the Miss Detroit 5 and the Miss America 1.
The rest were so far behind.
The rest were so far behind anyways. Yeah, so he was, and the only reason, so think about it like this, if the waters had been choppier, the Miss Detroit 5 would have won the heat against the Miss America 1.
Yeah.
But it would have blown out the other one still. So either way, Gar Wood would have won that race. And so you'll see that a lot. Gar Wood, despite all these races, Gar Wood starts to bring like 2 or 3 boats in, and it's always his boat that wins.
Right.
That is, his brother doesn't win, or these other guys that are driving. They're always sort of ancillary characters, or they might win a heat to help him win the overall. But otherwise, it's always his boat. He's always got the best.
It's
boat.
him and the pairs.
He's always got the best boat too.
He's keeping the best one for himself.
100%. So as much as so if it would have been rough waters, he might have been behind the Miss Detroit 5. So anyway, so 1921. Now the Harmsworth race comes to Detroit. And so at this point, Gar Wood's won 4 straight Gold Cups. He's won the Harmsworth, and he has set himself up as the greatest owner, driver, builder of speedboats in the world. I mean, he's established. So now the question becomes: is he just sort of like a flash in the pan? Is there somebody else that's going to just become the next big thing? And so now he's basically a marked man. Now, Detroit is the capital of speedboat racing. Whether you're going for the American Championship of the Gold Cup or you're going for the International Championship of the Harmsworth, you got to come to Detroit in either case, and you got to go against Gar Wood. So 1920.
I have 600 engines I'm working on over here.
Yeah, for people that are Detroit sports history, which is probably a lot of people that are tuning into the show. So 1921. What else is going on in Detroit sports right now in 1921?
I have no idea.
Nothing.
Nothing.
There's nothing happening in Detroit sports. There's no Detroit Lions.
We have no football.
There's no football. There's no hockey. The Tigers are nothing. The Tigers, Ty Cobb left the team. Ty Cobb was still with the Tigers, but he was only there for another couple of years. I think he was managing at this point.
Okay.
But the Tigers were nothing to write home about. They had nothing. There was nothing. There was the Gar Wood was it.
Right.
He was Detroit sports at this time.
Okay.
There was nothing else. And so of course he's dominating the coverage. That's why he became so big, because for really a decade, from 1921 all the way through 35, there's nothing. 30 like the Lions didn't come to Detroit till 1934.
Mm-hmm.
The Red Wings came in 1926, but they changed their name 3 times in 5 years.
Right.
They did really nothing up until the 1935 season. Like I say, the Lions came in 34. The Tigers were terrible until Mickey Cochran got there prior to 1934, and so it was Gar Wood for a decade that had sole coverage, sole centerpiece. There was no Joe Louis. He came in 1935.
Yeah.
There was nothing there. Gar Wood was it. And we're going to see as the rest, not necessarily today, but we're going to see that he was so big that there's people there's literally a million people coming to the Detroit Riverfront to watch these races. But in 1921, we hadn't gotten up to a million. We're at this point, we're at 400,000 people coming to the races. The primary antagonist for Gar Wood in this story is a man named Commodore Sheldon Clark of the Chicago Yacht Club.
Sheldon.
Yes. So, but more important than Sheldon, the name Sheldon
Commodore.
is Chicago.
Oh.
So this rivalry between Detroit and Chicago, the Chicago Yacht Club is coming for Detroit. They don't want Detroit to be the Midwestern capital of anything.
No.
And so Chicago is coming for the boat. And so to facilitate, this is how bad Commodore Sheldon Clark of the Chicago Yacht Club wanted the Harmsworth Trophy, was that he poached Chris Smith from Gar Wood.
You rats.
Yes. And so not since his days of building the Miss Minneapolis because he was basically broke.
Right.
Now Chris Smith is going to build the Miss Chicago for the Chicago Yacht Club.
That's no fun. No.
Come on.
Jumping ship.
Jump ship. He builds the Miss Chicago to challenge against Gar Wood on Detroit River.
They're probably throwing money at him.
Oh, totally.
Like,
totally. And so that brings up
Chris
the question.
Is like, I gotta.
So this brings up the question about why Chris Smith would betray Detroit. It wasn't that big of a
wheelbarrows full of money.
There you go. Yes.
That's probably what it was.
And so the thing about it was, and by no means am I saying he betrayed, because there's some very good reasons why he did what he did. And number one, is that we talked about how Chris Smith, at one point, we had an episode, his last 7 cents. There was a point in Chris Smith's career where he was down to nothing. He had no money. And when Gar Wood came in, he was building boats for Gar Wood, especially the hulls of the boats.
Yeah.
And he was making good money working for Gar Wood, building these boats. And then the Speedboat Kings alludes to the idea that Chris Smith needed one last big payday because he wanted to start his own company. He wanted to really become like a manufacturer. Basically, he wanted to become kind of, I don't want to say the Henry Ford of boats, because I don't think he was really into just the mass production. He just loved the boat building, and he didn't want to just build speedboats the rest of his life for Gar Wood. He wanted to build a variety of boats, pleasure craft, small yachts. He wanted to sort of bring power boating to the masses. And so he needed some money to finance this entire venture.
Oh, there you go.
And so he needed one last really big paycheck to get this thing off the ground. And so that's why he took the money from the Chicago Yacht Club.
Chicago rats.
Yeah, from the Chicago. So anyways, so you can kind of understand it with that thing. So so here's the thing though, is that it didn't matter, because in the 1921 Harmsworth race, the Miss Chicago is completely outclassed by the Miss America. But not only the Miss America 1, which was Gar Wood drafted back into service, but also the Miss America 2. So the Miss America 1 and 2 both beat the Miss Chicago in the Harmsworth race, with, of course, Gar Wood driving the Miss America 2 across the finish line to win the race. So also in 1921, Gar Wood would win his 5th consecutive Gold Cup. right? And so and also in 1921, September 21st, 1921, Gar Wood sets a new world record for speed on water at 80.567 miles an hour.
Oh, it's getting serious
It's
out
getting
there.
serious. If you remember some of the other
19 miles an hour.
Yeah. So 1918. Well, he went 70 miles an hour with the Curtiss engine in a Miss Detroit 3. So yeah, the evolution from 1893 at 9 miles an hour, 1910 35 miles an hour, 1912 53 miles an hour, to 70 in 1980. Now we're at 80 miles an hour.
Getting serious.
It's getting super serious in a wood boat.
Yeah.
So he sets the new world record for speed on water in 1921. And so here we are. So Gar was he maintains his title and he's still the star. So anyways, so it's with all these things going on, and so all this stuff happens. Gar was at like sort of the peak, and then a bombshell is dropped on him by the American Powerboat Association in the winter of 1921 to 22.
Yeah.
So following all this all this stuff in 1921, the American Powerboat Association, who runs the Gold Cup, announced 2 new rule changes. Okay, the first one is a ban on hydroplane boats, right? And then the second one is a limit on engine size to 625 cubic inches. So let me do I need to say anything?
Yeah.
Gar Wood is not first. That rule was completely 100%.
You are going too fast, mister.
Rule was 100% designed.
Let's describe Gar's boat.
So
you can't drive that anymore.
Yes, so the rule was obviously and 100% completely designed to run him out of the Gold Cup races,
right?
Because they're like, basically he was too big. Right. He's too big for the Gold Cup races. This is 5th Gold Cup in a row. He's completely dominant. And so this is what Gar Wood's quote was. There's a quote in Speedboat Kings what Gar Wood said. He said, "So Gar Wood wasn't pleased with the change. It looked to him like they were trying to take the Gold Cup trophy from him by making rules instead of making boats. I'm being robbed," he said. "The new rules cut down his speed. After a man has traveled 80 miles an hour, a mere 40 miles palls him." So he's like, I'm not going 40 to win these Gold Cup races. I'm going faster.
Yeah.
And so he's done with Gold Cup races. He's done. So he's like, I don't even care about that anymore. I want the world I'm going for. So from here on out, Gar Wood is purely Harmsworth.
That's it.
The Gold Cup is like beneath them. You see what I'm saying? Like, because if he can't win, because if he wins the Harmsworth, that includes every world trophy,
That's
America and every other one. So they basically excluded him, and the rules will be changed back to unlimited after World War II. After Gar Wood retires, it went back to unlimited after Gar Wood was done.
Brats.
Well, but here's the thing. So I wrote this. But here's the thing. As rotten as it sounds, like Gar Wood got excluded, there was a couple reasons that the American Powerboat they didn't deny that it was to kind of run him out.
Yeah.
But the reason was they said the number one was that these custom hydroplane boats that they're building were just incredibly expensive.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you had to be like a Gar Wood bazillionaire to build these custom boats and to keep up because these things were getting damaged and you had to have a ton of money to keep up with this. And so it was so expensive that it was pricing a lot of people out of these competitions, and Gar Wood was just dominating. So, and then the second thing is that, we talked about the idea of these hydroplane boats, how there was that flat plane on the back that would raise the front of the boat out of the water.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because everybody was doing these hydroplane boats because they were faster, there's less water friction, that what it was doing was that standard displacement boats, just your standard hull, what the tech for for improving the speed on water of just regular standard displacement boats was lagging way behind.
Okay, because people focused on the other one.
Yeah, so you still got
the money was focused behind.
Everybody was trying to win these races. They all had to use hydroplanes in order to try to compete.
Right.
And so just your standard power boat was being was still in 1910. They're still going puttering along at 12 miles an hour while they got these super boats going 80. So they actually had a couple of legit reasons, and I don't hold it against them. As much as it was an obvious thing to run him out.
Yeah.
So that gave them 25 years to really run these to really get displacement boats kind of up to the tech of what they wanted what they were going to be. So of course Gar Wood is the primary person affected by this.
Yeah.
But the primary beneficiary is Chris Smith. Okay, because now, so Chris Smith is in. So since 1916, Chris Smith boat had won every Gold Cup since 1916, right? So he'd been winning it every year. So and even before, I've actually got a few more years before that. I didn't write the years on but anyways, so Chris Smith had his boats had been dominating the Gold Cup, and so this would continue for many years because this plays right into Chris Smith's wheelhouse. Right. So he gets to go from building these custom super boats for Gar Wood. Now the field is open to these because the Gold Cup race is still going to be in Detroit, and it's been in Detroit for several years. It's starting to become like an institution here. Regardless of who wins the trophy, it's now just in Detroit. You know, because it's been there for going on 6 years now, right? You know, 7 of the last 8 years have been in Detroit, so it's becoming like an institution. And so now what's happening is all this automobile money in the Roaring 20s. All this automobile money are buying Chris Smith boats, right? So he's starting to manufacture his first boats that he's putting out are these standard displacement boats with inboard engines. He's selling like 10, like maybe he'll make 5 of them, for the first race, sell them to all these rich Detroiters. They don't have to pay these $1 billion for a hydroplane boat. And now all these sort of rich elites like the Edsel Fords and that are racing against each other, purely for the Sunday cocktail hour type of thing. You know what I mean? So that's more of so Chris Smith's first business venture, leading off from Gar Wood, is selling smaller, cheaper speedboats to like the rich elite of Detroit, and so that's really what starts to help him develop this business, and so it is right at this point that Chris Smith starts the full name of the company is Chris Smith and Sons Boat Company, which is shortened to Chris Craft. Far easier to write that on the side of the boat. And we got a couple photos here to bring up. The last like sort of 5, I think we got 5 slides. And so what we're going to show here is the sort of this evolution of advertisements from Chris Smith, because we have from the 20s and 30s, all the way through the 40s, 50s, and 60s. There's just I've got just a series of different advertisements. If you can't see, if you're listening to the show, it's just you can find them for yourself. I got these all off like eBay, like screenshots. There's a million of them on there. You type up Chris Craft advertisements, and there's just a million of them. I mean, there's just a million sheets. And so, and that's kind of the point I'm trying to bring up with this, is that when you see it, you could just kind of cycle through these, Jamie, if you want, because like this first image says $1,295 buys you a Chris Craft, and they show these people driving a little small wooden speedboat, and then the picture on the left has got sort of smaller looking, Gar Wood style speedboats, and they're all racing. So these are like the first ones that he's building are these like sort of miniature speedboats for people that are like kind of race boats. And then as we cycle through, you can hit the next slides. You'll 38. See as we go through 1938, he's got a whole variety. He's got these little mini yachts and these little covered boats, like fishing boat with engines. He's got a huge variety. It's not just these little so he like sort of made his bones. He made his money in the speedboat world, and then he's just evolving into a variety of pleasure boats and speed boats and whatever. And we can keep cycling. We got one from I think 1947 is the next one.
1947 is the next one.
Yeah, we got the 47. We got so now we're in color ads. This is post World War II.
Right.
Chris Craft pleasure cruisers.
It's a mixture of the two.
It's a mixture. It's got everything.
Yeah.
And so one more shows like
Chris Craft will make you jump.
I think that's what that was what their radio pitch was. Yeah,
I think that one.
I think that's what they were using for their radio advertisements. So we got another one
in the 50s and the 60s.
We got one from 1950, one from 1960, and what you're seeing with all these ads, the fact that they're still in business in 1960, and I forgot, I'm not too well versed at what happens after the 1960s. I think they started to fade a little bit because I think they started to get a ton of competition with like different building materials. Wood was probably really expensive, and it was tough to do the mass manufacturing. But the thing about it was, so what they did though, it was a few years ago. I haven't looked up for an updated statistic on this, but it was a few years ago that I looked. I think it was like 6 years ago. I looked at how many registered boats were licensed in Michigan, and it was just a shade, like maybe 20,000 boats, less than 1 million. Okay, so it's probably well over 1 million by now. But what I'm saying, but think about that, 1 million speedboats. I don't even know, I don't know what the other states are. I don't have like a comparison. I don't have that data. But the thing about $1 million, that's got to be one of the most, of all the states in the country or of any country in the world, like mini state the size of Michigan, like with a population of comparable size. How many other places have over 1 million registered boats? Right? 1 million? So the question becomes like, well, you go, oh, well, that's because we have the Great Lakes. Or it could be because we have Chris Smith, mass production, building boats in the early days. And we also have Gar Wood and them making it exciting, that making these crazy races where there's, this 1921 race, there's 400,000 people. And that's small compared to what we're going to see in upcoming races when the whole world's attention are on these things. So what they're doing is, Gar Wood is fascinating people with these incredibly expensive boats. They're watching them on the riverfront, and now they might not be able to get one of these 80-mile-an-hour Miss America, twos, but they can get themselves a Chris Smith, thing that goes 40, 50, 60 miles an hour.
Which is still plenty fast.
Absolutely. And so they get to kind of imitate Gar Wood and zip around on speed. That's especially when that one advertisement says, yours for $1,200, I mean, they're actually making it so you can buy one of these things like you're buying a car, and so that's one of these impacts is that Chris Smith, there's no doubt that he had a huge impact on not just Gar Wood and the racing, but on the ability of the fascinating people with the idea of speed on water. And also the actually producing the vehicles that allowed people to buy these. I'm not going to say cheaply and easily or whatever, right. but at least at a reasonable volume and a reasonable enough cost that anybody could now be pretending they're Gar Wood on the water or imitating him. And I've got this great photo that we'll show in another episode in the future here.
Okay.
But it's a fantastic photo where it's this aerial view. It's taken obviously by airplane, and what it is like before this one particular Harmsworth race, there's all these speedboats that are all racing down the water. They're just for the heck of it. They're all just, it's before the Gar Wood race, and there's like 30 of them all racing. And the guy even says in the article caption, all these Detroiters are imitating their hero Gar Wood, and they're all trying to race just for the heck of it. It's an exhibition race, and so they're just racing before a Harmsworth race. And but I'm saying, like, these are the people. It's one thing. One of the questions I've always asked. I always looked at sports as like a beer drinkers thing, right? Like it was just no big deal, but a lot of times my favorite things about sports are when it answers the question in the affirmative of, does sport matter? Mm-hmm. Does it matter? What does it do? What kind of impact does it have outside of its domain, outside of the ring, outside of the race course, outside of the ballpark? What kind of impacts do these things have? That's my favorite component about sports. And this right here is an example of the kind of impact. We look around, we see speedboats, and we just go, oh, yeah, it's cool, we got a speed on the river. But that started somewhere. It's like Henry Ford, when we talk about why did everybody have cars? Before Henry Ford started mass producing them, those automobiles were for only the elite that could find some custom-built vehicle or whatever that, you have some special mechanic make a car, and everybody else has got horses in that. And then once everybody started getting cars for cheap, it opened up the world for people to go and do stuff. And so that's the same thing so that's what we're talking about, like a sort of a Henry Ford-like story here of how speedboats became disseminated to the public and in large volumes. And, like people saw it on the river and they're like, I got to get one of those things, and Chris Smith is selling them over here. So, so that's what I'm saying. Like, is sports important? Like the races, the capturing the public's interest and imagination and then the Chris Smith going from being Gar Wood's boat builder to being a mass production and putting these boats in the hands of these people for decades. That's what started all this stuff, And if you ever go to Algonac, I tell you, it's totally. If you like this story, if you like this stuff, and I've said it a bunch of times already, that Algonac is one of the crown jewels of Detroit sports. Yeah. It's got the Gar Wood in the Algonac Maritime Hall of Museum. not Hall of Fame, but the museum, and it's got a statue of Gar Wood out front of it. And I'm telling you, if you have a chance, this any summer, this summer, whatever, any summer, pick a nice day, go to Algonac.
Yeah.
I know it's like kind of like you're like Algonac. I've never been there, and I have no idea why I would ever go. Just go. It's a beautiful little town. It's right on the river. They have little art fairs. There's one art fair in particular that's I used to do it every year, and it's a beautiful little art fair. It's a beautiful little town, and it's there's kind of like one way into town.
Yeah.
It's not the easiest place to get to, but it's the coolest place because when you go there, especially if you're, been listening to the story and you're following the story, when you go there on one of these nice summer days, the whole river is full of wooden Chris Craft boats.
Oh, yeah.
It's not your modern day boats like this. It's like it's like you've gone back in time, right? And I was doing this art show, and I'm telling you, I'm sitting there doing this art show, and every one of them I did. I think I did it for 4 or 5 years in a row. And like every time I went there was like wooden speedboats, like vintage 1930s. You're like, not only is the Gar Wood Museum right there, part of the art show, I can see Gar Wood. I'm selling our books about Gar Wood at a place with Gar Wood's statue looking at me.
Right.
But behind me are all these Gar Wood ended up having his own Gar Wood. They call it like baby Gar boats, Gar Wood boats. And so there was Gar Wood boats. There was Chris Craft boats. There's all these old wooden boats driving around. And you're like, this is awesome.
There's another spot like that in the UP. It's called Cedarville.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you go up in the UP, and it's east of the bridge over by Marquette Island.
They got wood boats like the Chris Crafts?
They have a boat building school.
Oh, really?
So you can learn how to build
these
kind of boats.
Yeah.
And the harbor is just filled with all these boats.
It's so cool to see.
Colleen and I were looking
they're
at a
loud,
property up there.
they're loud, they're freaking, but they're
just
beautiful.
gorgeous.
They're beautiful
It's
boats.
Sunset and just the sun glistening on them. It was just amazing.
There's a scene, if anybody's ever seen Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, there's the scenes where they go to Italy, and the one boat gets all chopped up, but they have those two beautiful boats. And I forgot to even look. I don't even know if they're Chris Craft boats or not, but they're that style. I think they are because they have like the sort of two-seater thing, and they're beautiful boats. One of them they chop up, for God's sake. It's like the worst tragedy watching them chop one of them up in that boat propeller. But it's just got that, it's got that nostalgia where it's like nothing screams like that, that quality, like those handmade wooden mahogany, Chris Craft speedboats. And
so
this is where the stuff
Algonac
starts.
and Cedarville, though, if you're into these boats,
I have to take a look at Cedarville.
It's
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's an amazing. And there's a school, so it's like you see all the wood. They got all the logs stacked to be finished.
That's awesome.
I
definitely going to say, I definitely got to check that out. But I'm saying like this is where it all starts. There's a reason for everything. Like this is for Detroiters, for people that care about Detroit sports, and that like this. This is where it all starts. This is a one particular genre. This is the speedboating component. This is where this stuff starts. But you see anybody that's following along with this now, we're on episode 55.
Yeah.
All these different stories weave together this tapestry of like you're following each of these stories, and we see every one of these stories we've talked about about how these things set the foundation for everything else that came after it.
Yeah.
And when you weave it all together, you see this tapestry of Detroit history, Detroit sports history, and it's just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
It all starts here. So, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Episode after, that's where we're at. So.
That's it. So, thanks for throwing on a life vest and getting in the boat with us for this ride. We appreciate it. Like and subscribe, leave a comment, tell a couple of friends, leave the comments, and we appreciate everybody there. And all right, that's it.
Episode 55 out, 56 next. We're about to be like 280.
Everybody out of the pool.
Yeah.